Maya Hendricks was 26 years old when she first walked into the glass tower on Fifth Avenue for her job interview. She had a folder in one hand, a coffee stain on her sleeve that she had tried to rub out on the subway, and a quiet kind of hope in her chest. She did not know that morning that this building would change her life. She did not know that the man sitting behind the big desk on the 32nd floor would one day break her heart in a way that took years to heal. His name was Daniel Croft. Everyone in the city knew that name. He was 34, the founder and CEO of Croft Capital, a company that had grown from a small investment firm into one of the most powerful financial groups on the East Coast. The magazines called him brilliant. The newspapers called him ruthless. The people who worked for him called him demanding, but fair. He was tall, clean-cut, and carried himself like a man who had never once doubted his own decisions. Maya was hired as a junior communications associate. She was smart, careful with words, and worked harder than anyone else on her floor. She came in early and stayed late. She reread her emails 3 times before sending them. She noticed things other people missed, small details in press statements, tiny gaps in messaging that could cause big problems later. Within 4 months, she had caught 3 errors that would have become public embarrassments for the company. Daniel noticed. He called her into his office one afternoon in October. The city was orange outside his windows. He told her she had good instincts. She thanked him and turned to leave. He asked her to stay and explain her thinking on the 3rd correction she had made. She sat down and talked for 20 minutes. He listened the whole time without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then said she was exactly the kind of person the company needed more of. She walked back to her desk feeling something shift inside her, though she could not name it then. They started talking more. At first it was always about work. He would stop by her desk or send a message asking her opinion on something. Then it became longer conversations over coffee in the small kitchen near his office. Conversations that started with work but slowly drifted into other things, their families, their childhoods, the books they had read, the places they wanted to go. She found out he had grown up poor in Ohio, that his father had left when he was 9, that he had built everything he had from nothing. He found out she had grown up in a small town in Georgia, that she had put herself through college, that she still called her mother every Sunday without fail. By the time spring came, they were no longer just colleagues having coffee. They were careful about it, quiet about it, the way you are when something feels too important to risk with too many words. He asked her to dinner in April. She said yes. The restaurant was nice, much nicer than anywhere she had ever been, but he was not trying to impress her. He was nervous, and she found that more moving than anything else he could have done. They kept things private. Neither of them announced it. He worried about how it would look to the board, to the staff. She understood, though there were moments when the secrecy felt heavy. Still, she believed in him. She believed in what they were building together, not just inside the walls of that glass tower, but in the quieter spaces between them, in his apartment on weekends, in her small kitchen where she cooked, and he sat on the counter and talked while she stirred pots. He told her once, on a Sunday morning when the light was coming through the curtains and everything was still and warm, that he had never felt this comfortable with anyone before. She remembered those words for a long time after everything fell apart. It was November, about 18 months after that first job interview, when Maya found out she was pregnant. She sat on the bathroom floor of her apartment for a long time after the test showed positive. She was not panicking. She was thinking, carefully and honestly, the way she always thought through hard things. She was not sure how he would react. But she loved him, and she believed, because of everything he had shown her, that he loved her too. She told herself that love could hold this, that they were strong enough. She told him on a Tuesday evening at his apartment. She had cooked dinner, and the table was set, and she waited until they were sitting together before she said it quietly and plainly. She was pregnant. She watched his face. Something moved across it fast, something she did not have a name for. And then his expression became still and careful, the way it looked in board meetings when he was controlling a room. He did not speak for a long moment. Then he said they needed to think clearly about this. He said his words slowly, like he was managing a press release. He said the timing was not right. He said the company was in the middle of a critical growth phase. He said a child right now would complicate things in ways that were hard to explain. He said she understood business. She knew how these things worked. She knew how much was riding on the next 2 years. He said he would take care of everything. He used that phrase twice. He would take care of everything. What he meant she understood clearly, was that he wanted her to end the pregnancy. Maya did not cry in front of him. She sat very still and listened to every word he said. She asked him once, directly, if he wanted this child. He looked at the table. He said it was not the right time. She asked him again. He said they had to be practical. She asked a third time, and he finally looked at her and said no, not now, not like this. She nodded slowly. She picked up her fork and finished a few bites of her dinner. She drank a small sip of water. Then she stood up, thanked him for being honest, picked up her bag, and walked to the door. He called her name once from the table. She paused with her hand on the door frame, but did not turn around. Then she walked out. That night she sat in her apartment and did not sleep. She thought about the Sunday mornings and the kitchen conversations, and the way he had looked at her sometimes like she was the only solid thing in a fast-moving world. She thought about the child growing inside her, small and new and completely unaware of any of this. She thought about her mother, who had raised her alone with very little and had never once made her feel like a burden. She thought about what kind of woman she wanted to be. By morning, she had made two decisions. She was keeping her baby, and she was leaving Daniel Croft. She resigned from the company the next day with a simple, professional letter that said nothing personal. She moved out of the city within 3 weeks, back to Georgia, to her mother's house, where the air smelled different and the neighbors waved from their driveways, and nobody knew her name from any newspaper. She told her mother everything. Her mother held her hands across the kitchen table and said nothing for a while, and then said, "You made the right choice, baby." Both of them. Daniel tried to reach her twice in the first week. She did not answer. He sent one email that was careful and cold, and said he hoped she was well, and that if she needed anything he was available. She read it once, closed it, and did not reply. After that, he went silent. Maybe he was relieved. Maybe he told himself she had made a choice, and he respected it. She did not spend much time wondering. She had other things to do now. She had a life to build, a second time, from the beginning, with someone new counting on her to get it right. Her daughter was born on a warm evening in late July. Maya held her and felt something settle deep inside her chest, something that had been unsteady for a long time. She named her Clara. Clara had dark eyes and a very serious expression for someone so new to the world. Maya looked at her and thought, quietly and with great certainty, that she had never made a better decision in her life. She did not know yet that 7 years later, she would walk back into a room where Daniel Croft was standing. She did not know how much would have changed by then, or how much would still be exactly the same. She only knew the girl in her arms and the road ahead, and that she was ready for both. The years in Georgia were not easy, but they were good. Maya rented a small house 2 streets from her mother, with a yard that had a lemon tree and a wooden porch where she sat in the evenings after Clara was asleep. She found work as a freelance communications consultant, building her client list slowly and carefully the way she did everything. She wrote press materials for small businesses, helped local companies shape their public messaging, and within 2 years she was earning enough to stop worrying about money every single morning. Within 4 years, she had built a small but respected firm with 3 employees and a client list that stretched to Atlanta and beyond. She had done it all while packing school lunches and attending parent-teacher evenings and learning the names of every child in Clara's class. Clara was the kind of child who made people stop and smile. She was quiet and observant, the way Maya had been as a girl, but she had a sudden laugh that came out of nowhere and lit up whatever room she was in. She asked questions about everything. She wanted to know why the sky changed color at sunset, why some people were sad, how rivers knew which way to go. Maya answered as honestly as she could, always. She had made a promise to herself that Clara would grow up knowing she could ask anything and her mother would not look away. Clara did not ask about her father until she was 5. She asked it simply, the way children ask things, without knowing the full weight of the question. She said, "Mama, do I have a daddy somewhere?" Maya had thought about this moment many times. She had rehearsed different answers in her head while driving, while lying awake at night. What she said was this: "Yes, you do. He is a person who was not ready to be a father when you were born. That is not about you. That is about him. And you are loved completely. Do you understand?" Clara had nodded and then asked if she could have a snack, and that was that for another year. Maya did not carry bitterness about Daniel the way some people carry old pain, pressing on it constantly to see if it still hurt. She had made peace with it by choosing not to let it define her. She was not angry. Or at least she no longer had to work hard to push the anger down. What she felt, when she thought about him at all, was something closer to a kind of tired sadness, the feeling of looking at a door that was closed a long time ago, and knowing it opened onto something that was never going to be what she had hoped. She moved forward. That was the only direction that mattered. She started dating again when Clara was 3. Nothing serious for a long time. A dinner here, a coffee there. She was careful, the way you are careful when you are a mother and you understand that your choices affect someone else's whole world. There was a man named Patrick, a teacher, who was kind and consistent and genuinely good to Clara. They dated for almost a year. He wanted to get more serious. Maya cared for him, but knew something was missing. Not a dramatic thing, just a quiet knowing. The way you know a coat almost fits, but not quite. She ended it honestly and gently, and he was sad but understood. They stayed friendly. That felt like a small proof that she was growing. Back in New York, Daniel Croft's life had not been still either. His company had grown even larger, as he had always planned. He had been on the cover of 2 financial magazines. He had expanded into Europe, opened offices in London and Frankfurt, and was considered one of the most important figures in private equity in the country. From the outside, everything looked the way he had always wanted it to look. He had the apartment, the recognition, the kind of power that came with being in rooms where decisions were made. He had also married, 2 years after Maya left, a woman named Serena who moved in the same social circles he did, who was polished and appropriate and never complicated his plans. The marriage lasted for years. It ended without drama, a mutual agreement between 2 people who had been more business partners than partners in the fuller sense. There were no children. Daniel had told himself for years that he did not want them. He was too focused, too driven, too responsible in the sense that he believed he could not do justice to a child the way his own absent father had not done justice to him. He had built his logic carefully, the way he built everything. But logic has a habit of looking different at 3 in the morning when the apartment is empty and the city hums distantly below. He did not think about Maya constantly, but he thought about her more than he would have admitted. He thought about the way she used to argue with him when she thought he was wrong, not loudly, but with a steady patience that somehow made her points cut deeper. He thought about a specific Tuesday evening when he had watched her leave his apartment and had not stood up or called her back with any real force, and how that choice had lived in him as a small, quiet regret that never quite left. It was his communications director who first brought Maya's name back into his professional world. Her firm had been recommended by a contact in Atlanta for a major rebranding project Croft Capital was undertaking. The director had no idea about the history. He simply put a name and a proposal on Daniel's desk and said this one was very good, solid work, strong client feedback, worth considering. Daniel stared at the name on the top of the proposal for a long moment. Then he read every page of it. The proposal was excellent. That was the honest truth. It was clear, original, and showed a level of understanding of complex financial communication that was genuinely rare. He could see her in every paragraph, the same sharp thinking he had noticed all those years ago on the 32nd floor. He sat back in his chair and thought for a long time. He told himself he was considering it professionally. He told himself the past was a long time ago. He told himself 2 adults could work together maturely. And maybe all of that was true. But there was also something else, something he was not quite ready to name clearly. He approved the proposal. His director reached out to Maya's firm. Maya was in Atlanta when the call came. She was sitting at a coffee shop across from a client when her phone buzzed with a message from her office manager saying Croft Capital in New York had reached out and wanted to discuss a major contract. She read the name twice. She sat back in her chair. The client across from her was still talking, but she was no longer fully in the room. She was somewhere else for a moment, somewhere made of old memory and quiet, complicated feeling. She did not call back that day. She went home, made dinner, helped Clara with a school project about the water cycle, and after Clara was asleep, she sat on the porch with a cup of tea and the quiet of the neighborhood around her. She thought carefully. The contract was significant, the kind of project that would take her firm to a new level of visibility nationally. She was not going to turn it down because of personal history. She was not that woman. She had built something real, and she was going to keep building it. And she was not going to shrink from a room because Daniel Croft was in it. She called back the next morning. She spoke with the communications director, not Daniel. She was professional and composed. She asked the right questions and answered all of theirs. By the end of the week, the contract was confirmed. She would travel to New York in 3 weeks for the first major meeting. She told her mother, who went quiet for a moment and then asked how she was feeling about it. Maya said she was fine and meant it more than her mother probably believed. She told Clara only that she had a big work trip to New York coming up. Clara asked if she could come and see the tall buildings. Maya laughed and said maybe one day. Clara said she wanted to see the one that touched the clouds. Maya looked at her daughter's serious dark eyes and felt the familiar feeling, the one that had been there since that warm July evening 7 years ago, the feeling of being completely, absolutely certain that she had made the right choice. She booked her flight. She pressed confirm on the screen and sat with the small vibration of that decision moving through her. She was going back, not as the girl who had been asked to disappear, not as the woman who had left quietly with no fuss and no scene. She was going back as someone who had built her own life with her own hands, on her own terms. Whatever happened in that room, she would walk into it standing straight. And whatever Daniel Croft thought when he saw her again, she already knew the most important thing. She did not need anything from him. She had not needed anything from him for a very long time. That, she understood, was the only kind of power that ever really mattered. The morning Maya flew into New York was gray and cool, the kind of October sky that felt familiar, the same color as the city had always been in her memory. She took a car from the airport and watched the skyline come up slowly out of the distance, the tall buildings crowding the horizon like old acquaintances she had not seen in a long time. She was steady. She had slept on the plane, eaten breakfast, called her mother, and texted her office manager with a few last details. She was prepared. She had learned a long time ago that preparation was the best armor she owned. The hotel was close to Midtown. She checked in, changed into the clothes she had planned for the meeting, and stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a moment. She was 33 now, not 26. The woman looking back at her was calmer, more settled in her own face. She thought briefly of the girl who had taken the subway to that same glass tower 7 years ago with a coffee stain on her sleeve and a folder in her hand. She felt a quiet tenderness toward that younger version of herself. That girl had not known what was coming, but she had handled it. She had more than handled it. The Croft Capital offices were exactly as she remembered, except larger. There had been renovations since her time there. The lobby was all white stone and warm lighting now, the kind of design that said wealth without needing to be loud about it. The receptionist checked her name and directed her to the 32nd floor. She smiled at that. Some things did not change. She rode the elevator up alone, and the doors opened onto a space that was different enough from her memory that she did not feel like she was stepping backward in time. She felt only that she was arriving somewhere new, on a Tuesday morning, for work. The communications director greeted her first. His name was Ryan, young and efficient, and he walked her to the conference room where the core team was already assembled. She shook hands, sat down, opened her materials. She had a presentation ready, clean and well-structured, the kind of work she was genuinely proud of. For 20 minutes, she did not think about Daniel at all. She was in the room fully, the way she always worked. He came in 12 minutes late with the quiet confidence of a man who owned the building. She heard the door and looked up, and there he was. For a fraction of a second, something moved through her chest. Not pain exactly, not warmth either, something more complex and harder to name. The feeling of looking at a part of your own history in 3 dimensions. He looked older, a little. His face had the same strong structure, but there were lines around his eyes now that had not been there before. He was still composed, still held himself the same way, but something about him was different too. She could not place it immediately. He looked at her. He did not smile right away. For a moment, they simply looked at each other across the conference table, and the whole room was quietly aware that something was happening between them that went beyond a first introduction, though nobody said a word. Then he nodded, said it was good to see her, and sat down. She said the same, and the meeting continued. She gave her presentation. It was good, and she knew it was good, not from pride, but from the simple, honest assessment she always applied to her own work. The team asked strong questions, and she answered all of them. Daniel asked 2 questions, both specific and sharp. The first was about the timeline for the rebrand rollout. The second was about how she would handle crisis messaging if the rebrand met public resistance. Both questions showed he had read her proposal thoroughly. She answered directly, with detail, and when she finished he said, "Good," quietly, and wrote something in his notebook. The meeting ended with a clear path forward. Handshakes, schedules confirmed, next steps outlined. People drifted out of the room. Ryan was talking to two colleagues near the door. Maya was putting her materials back into her bag. She heard the room become quieter and knew, without looking up, that Daniel was still there. He said her name. She finished putting the folder away and then looked up. The room was empty now except for them. He was standing a few feet away, not close, not staged, just standing, with his hands in his pockets and an expression she had not seen on him before. He looked, for just a moment, like the version of himself he had only ever let her see in private, in his apartment kitchen on Sunday mornings. Less controlled, more real. He said he was glad she came. She said she was glad too, that the project was a good one. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he owed her an apology. He said it plainly, without decoration, the way someone says something they have carried a long time and finally put down. He said he had handled things badly 7 years ago. He said he had been afraid, that the fear had dressed itself up as logic and practicality, and that he had said things that were wrong. He said he was sorry. Maya listened to all of it. She did not fill the silence with reassurance while he was speaking. When he finished, she took a breath and said she appreciated him saying it. She said it had taken her a long time to stop being hurt by what happened, but that she had built a good life, one she was proud of, and that she did not carry anger toward him. She said she meant that. He nodded, and his eyes had something in them that looked like relief and grief at the same time. Then he asked about the child. His voice was careful on those words, and she could see it cost him something to ask. She was quiet for a moment. She thought about Clara at home in Georgia, doing her homework at the kitchen table, asking her grandmother questions about things she didn't understand yet. She thought about how to answer this honestly, but also carefully, because this was not just her story. It was Clara's too. She said yes, she had a daughter. She said she was 6 going on 40. She said she was healthy and bright, and the best decision she had ever made. Daniel looked at the table. He said, I thought about it. More than you probably think. She said she believed him. She did. She had learned enough about people by now to know that regret often arrived long after the moment that created it. She told him the daughter did not know his name yet. She told him that was a conversation she would have someday, when Clara was old enough to understand it in the right way, and that when that day came, she would be honest with her child, the way she was honest about everything. She said that was not an invitation, and it was not a door closed forever. She said she did not know what it was yet, and that was the truth. He did not push. He did not ask for anything. He said he understood, and the way he said it convinced her that he did. They stood in the quiet of the conference room for another moment. Two people who had once meant a great deal to each other, and had then spent 7 years becoming different people in different cities. The space between them was not hostile. It was not romantic. It was something more complicated and more honest than either of those things. It was two adults who had done harm and healing and living, standing on the other side of all of it. She picked up her bag. She said she would be in touch with Ryan about the next phase of the project. He said he looked forward to it. She walked toward the door and then stopped, turned back, and said one more thing. She said she wanted him to know that she did not blame him anymore, not because what he had done was right, but because the life she had built was too good for her to spend any more of it in the shadow of what he had done wrong. She said Clara was proof that the hardest moments sometimes led to the most important places. Then she walked out. In the elevator going down, she stood very still and felt everything move through her slowly and then settle. By the time the lobby doors opened and the October air came in from the street, she felt clean. Not empty, but clean, the way you feel after you have finally set down something that was never meant to be carried forever. She called her mother from the sidewalk. Her mother answered on the second ring. Maya said, "It went well, and I'm okay, and I'll tell you everything when I get home." Her mother said good, and said Clara had made a drawing for her and left it on the kitchen table. Maya smiled and looked up at the gray city sky and thought about driving home on Sunday and walking in the door and seeing that drawing and Clara's face and the lemon tree in the backyard. The world was full of things that had not broken her. The world was full of things she had built in spite of everything. She walked to the corner, raised her hand for a cab, and started the next part of her life exactly the way she had started every part before it, by moving forward, with her eyes open, and nothing behind her but the evidence of how far she had already come.